Good morning. I am Pamela. I am a co-leader of Explorers with Brenda, and she makes me do stuff, so here I am. So we will read responsively Psalm 96. It's page 816 in Voices United. Sing to God a new song. Sing and bless God's holy name. Tell the glad news of salvation from day to day. For great is God, and greatly to be praised, to be revered above all the gods. Honor and majesty attend you. Ascribe to God, your families of people. Ascribe to God glory and strength. Worship God in the beauty of holiness, and let the whole world stand in awe. The world is made firm and cannot be shaken. Let the heavens rejoice and the earth be glad. And then let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. And you come, O God, to judge the earth. All right, so Matthew 22:15 to 22, New Revised Standard Version, updated edition. The question of paying taxes. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him the denarius. Then they said to him, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "Caesar's." Then he said, "Give therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. May God bless those words to our understanding.
All that I am, all that I do, all that I'll ever have, I offer now to you. All that I dream, all that I pray, all that I'll ever make, I give to you today. Take and sanctify these gifts for your honor, Lord, knowing that I love and serve you is enough reward. My memory tells me that I sang that every Sunday growing up. That's probably wrong. We probably didn't do it every year in Sunday school, but my memory tells me that we did, and, well, memory is sometimes strange. But it was that reminder as we were growing up of our call to remember that God gives us gifts and we share them with God. Today's story from Matthew also reminds us of that in a different way. The Pharisees and Herodians, who normally have nothing to do with each other, politically they have very little in common, because the Pharisees are a group who are trying to bring the Jewish people back to their understanding of proper obedience, proper following of God's way. Not big fans of the Romans. The Herodians are a group of people who are of the elite, who are, well, they're sort of puppets. They work with the Romans. They may not be big fans of the Romans, but they've developed ways to work with Romans and benefit out of it. Two groups don't have a lot together. But, of course, the enemy of my enemy. So they both have trouble with Jesus. Probably for different reasons, but they both find Jesus troubling. So they get together. And as Ralph Milton puts it in his retelling, they seek to find some way to get himself in trouble. This happens more than once in Matthew, where the Jewish leadership comes to try to lay a trap, and Jesus usually sees right through it. Tell us, they said, is it lawful to pay the tax? Now, the tax, it's commonly believed that the tax they're talking about in this passage is a poll tax. It's not a tax on your produce. It's not a tax on your business. It's, you exist, give us money. A head tax. Everybody has to pay it. Is it lawful to pay Caesar the tax? Yes or no? It seems like a simple, straightforward question, doesn't it? And yet there's no right answer, no safe answer. Because if Jesus says undeniably, yes, go ahead, pay the tax, in a conquered nation, in an oppressed nation, in a nation under imperial rule, there are always those people who say we shouldn't do anything the Romans tell us, much less support them. Because these taxes aren't going to support health care. These taxes aren't going to support the poor and indigent of the population. These taxes are going straight to Rome to pay for the legions, to pay for Caesar's palaces, to pay for his feasts. So Jesus can't unequivocally say, yes, empire is a good thing. Especially because Jesus spends much of his time pointing, and the prophets before him spend much of their time pointing out that empire is, not so much a good thing. On the other hand, to simply say, no, you don't have to do it. Well, I think we can all guess what reaction that might get from the Roman authorities. It would sort of be like standing on the corner by City Hall and saying, oh, by the way, property tax is a bad thing, don't pay them. I think that city administration might have a word or two to say about that. So, what does Jesus do? Well, he sees through the trap. Tell me, he says, what do you use to pay the tax? Now, in the temple, because this is all taking place in the temple, everything in these chapters of Matthew takes place within the temple precincts. It's after Palm Sunday and before Good Friday. It's in that week in between. Everything is happening in the temple precincts. Now, if you remember the Ten Commandments, first was, you shall have no other God before me. Second is, you shall make no graven image. Tell me, he says, bring out a coin. Now, in the temple, you shouldn't have a coin which has Caesar's head on it. Graven image. Okay, so they pull out a coin because, I mean, realistically, you're going to have a coin. If you're in the elite, you're going to have money, and if you're going to take part in imperial banking and imperial financial system, you have to have imperial coins. So tell me, he says, whose head's on that coin? Whose title is on that coin? The head, of course, is Caesar. Every time a new emperor came around, they started issuing new coinage. That's one of the ways archaeologists can date exactly when coins were issued, because they can, if they're really good at it, they don't even have to see the whole head. They can just see bits of the head and know, well, no, that style was Emperor so-and-so. So we've got a graven image. But even more so, the title on that coin would have read, obviously not in English, Tiberius Caesar, August, son of the divine Augustus. And on the other side, Pontifex Maximus, or high priest. The coin itself would have named Caesar as son of God and high priest. So Jesus says, okay, well, obviously, that's not your coin. Obviously, that's not my coin. Obviously, that's Caesar's coin. So give it back to Caesar. Which did make me wonder if that means if I were to do this, does that belong to Sir Wilfrid Laurier? And how do I give it back to him? Although it doesn't have his title on it, so. It's a way out of the trap. But in his way out of the trap, Jesus leaves a bigger question, because it's not just give back to Caesar what's his, and give to God what's God's. And the story ends there because it bypasses the trap, and the leadership have to wander away, Matthew says in amazement. I have a suspicion they wander away saying, how are we going to get this guy? But it leaves that last phrase hanging in the air. Give to God what is God's. Okay, well, what's God's? What's God's? Psalm 24 tells us the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. Scripture from the beginning of Genesis tells us that all that is God's. That God speaks creation into being. Or possibly God sings creation into being, depending on how you interpret Genesis 1. All that is in it. So how do we give that back? What does it mean to give back to God when we say it's all God's? And as one of the articles I read this week pointed out, the end of Genesis 1, after everything has been created and God says, now let us create human beings in our image. Remember the question Jesus asked about the coin. Whose image is on that? Caesar's. Well, then give it back to Caesar's, obviously his. Let us create human beings in our image. Over and over again, we attest, we remind each other that we are all created in the image of God. Do you see where I'm going here? If we're created in God's image, whose are we? Whose are we? It's a challenge because we are brought up in a world which tells us we're our own person. You are your own person. Sometimes with a caveat, you are your own person as long as you behave properly. We're brought up in a world which reminds us that we have ownership of ourselves, ownership of our bodies, ownership of our lives. We get to tell our own stories. And that's all good. One of the things about Christian ethics is that there's very rarely, that's all bad, that's all good. And yet, we are created in God's image. We are God's. We belong to God. Which, again, is a wonderful thing. But how do we give back that which is God's? For centuries, people said, well, you did that by taking vows. If you had a vocation, you took a vow and you gave your life to God, you gave up all your worldly possessions. That's one way. But I don't think it's the only way. I think we give to God what is God's by how we use the gifts we've been given. You've heard me say it before. My definition of stewardship, my preferred definition of stewardship is it's what we do with everything. It's everything we do after we say, I believe. Stewardship isn't just about money. Stewardship is partly about money. Stewardship is not just about money. It's not about filling the offering plates. The church has often got that wrong, and we call our stewardship campaigns, well, they're our fundraising campaigns. Stewardship is about what we do with all of our lives, with all of the stuff in our lives. In a world of climate crisis, stewardship is about how do we change the impact we have on the world around us. In a world of warfare, stewardship is how do we use the gifts we've been given, the time we've been given, the voices we've been given to create more peace. In a world where things are not divided equally, where some have way more than they could ever spend in a million lifetimes. A million seconds is about 11 days. A billion second is 30-some years. Translate that to money. And then add a few zeros after the first billion. Some have more than they could spend in a million lifetimes, and some are scraping the bottom, looking for their next meal. Stewardship is about how do we level that playing field somewhat. Not so that we all have this, but so we all have the basics. Stewardship is about everything we do. That's how we give back to God what is God's. By what we do with all of the gifts we've been given. And those decisions aren't always clear-cut. And they're not always obvious. But if life were always clear-cut and obvious, that would get kind of boring. I could use some boring from now and every once in a while. When Jesus ends his story, but give to Caesar what's Caesar's, give to God what's God's, it's not the end of the story. It's the end of the way Matthew tells the story. But it's not the end of the story, because it's not the end of the conversation. It leaves hanging that key point of how do I give to God what is God's? How do I know what is God's? Whatever we render unto Caesar, or to the retirement fund, or to the offering basket at the church, we can never afford to forget this. We belong entirely to God. We may divide our budget, but we must never divide our allegiance. The coin of our realm, this is American, bears the image of dead presidents, but each of us bears another. Our emperor said, "Let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness." We must never forget to render unto God the things that are God's. May we be good stewards of the gifts we've been given. May we be good stewards of the love we've been given.